Well, there weren't any more great American leaders in the cabinet. The closest was Edmund Randolph, who uh, took Jefferson's place at the State Department, so he left the Attorney General's position. And the other replacements, Oliver Wolcott was certainly capable. He was Hamilton's hand-picked successor for the Treasury Department, and he had worked with Hamilton for the entire first term into the second term. So he knew what he was doing, and he was competent. He didn't have the creativity that Hamilton did. He certainly didn't have the charisma. He did not have the sort of political connections, the kind of political clout that Hamilton had developed. And then the Secretary of War, when Henry Knox did leave the War Department, and Knox we describe as he kind of lived in the shadow of Hamilton and Jefferson because they were so shiny and so brilliant, but that he was quite capable and did some very interesting things in the War Department. But when he left the War Department, by that point, Washington was having trouble getting people to even take minor posts within the government. It didn't pay well. All of Washington's first cabinet suffered financially as a result of being in the government, which is why Hamilton left in the first place. He went back to the law because he could make a living doing that, and Knox was broke, and he had a very large family that he had to support, and so he left, and Washington couldn't get anyone to take the job, and he ended up settling for Timothy Pickering, who was a very disagreeable man. And not particularly brilliant, not at all brilliant, not terribly imaginative, competent, but again, disagreeable. He was suspicious. He was paranoid about a lot of things. And ultimately, the combination of Pickering and Wolcott, two New Englanders, in some ways were going to isolate Washington from some of his closest friends. And it wasn't necessarily an unhappy time, but it really did end up surrounding Washington with virtual strangers. And so that second circle, when you're talking about the cabinet, is going to be a far different circle than what he started with.
And that is true. The idea that Washington continues in the presidency as a linear line of accomplishment is sadly not true, because in the second term, so many things begin to impinge on the presidency and him personally that he reacts quite understandably but regrettably as though these are personal affronts. For the first time, there are criticisms in the newspapers directly aimed at him rather than the office or the entourage or whatever. And Pickering and Wolcott create an atmosphere of suspicion. They are arch Federalists and are quite brash about it, to the point that they are impolitic. And we must remember they are the ones who actually begin the headlong plunge into reactionaryism with the Alien Sedition Act. So the Sedition Act of 1798 is one of the most odious pieces of legislation and is within living memory of the Revolution. And these were the people who sat up at night going through newspapers to find people to prosecute for speaking their mind under protections of the First Amendment. And these are the people who are influencing the second term. And it's one of the reasons that Washington does something incredible for him that he would have never considered doing in the first term, and publicly criticizing in his annual message the democratic societies and imputing to them seditious purposes. And this was a loyal opposition. And as Madison quite correctly said, and Jefferson agreed, if resistance to government policy is going to be regarded as disloyalty, then the experiment is coming to an